Okay, and welcome back from the break. We're now going to get into effective use of the EIV system to reduce improper payments associated with deceased tenants. And as you all know, I love the Deceased Tenants Report, and I love EIV so I can minimize housing dead people. So let's talk about the Deceased Tenants Report. This report is a very simplistic report. It simply identifies any currently assisted tenant who has been determined to be deceased according to SSA's Death Master File. And basically what EIV does, for example, this is now May 2nd. HUD has generated a file of all your tenants' identifiers to go over to SSA for matching. And if any of those individuals are flagged in SSA's Death Master File as being deceased, the EIV system will reflect that the individual is deceased and the date of death. Now, there will be some instances where the date of death is not provided to HUD because that date is not available in the SSA database. However, you want to use your deceased tenants report to identify those individuals, update the family composition if necessary, and do an end of participation transaction. And a lot of times folks want to know, well, when does a deceased tenant fall off of, or when is that deceased tenant removed from the deceased tenants report? And it's removed in one or two ways. Notice that the first way is that you, the housing authority, transmits a HUD form 50058 in which the family composition has been updated to remove or no longer contain that deceased individual, or you've submitted an EOP transaction for the household. Or in instances where the individual is flagged as deceased, but they are not deceased, and this does happen, so please, if you know that Luella is alive and you saw her and you know she's alive, then you need to refer her to the Social Security Administration so that she can be unflagged as dead. And I know that sounds funny, but it happens. It happens, and you know, I had a situation where tenant Mr. Satterfield has been listed dead for the last 10, 15 years. And it's just an oobie, it's a oopsies in the Death Master File. But the only way that that information can be corrected is by the tenant going to SSA and saying, here I am, I'm alive and kicking. And then they have to update their records. So once HUD obtains updated death information from SSA that the person is not dead, then the Deceased Tenants Report will be updated to reflect that corrected information from SSA's Death Master File. Now, one of the things that I am working to do is that in some instances, the death information is not reflected in the master database at SSA headquarters in Baltimore. So there have been instances where you have a letter from the local SSA office that says, hey, we updated our records to unflag this person as deceased. However, for whatever reason, it hasn't transferred to the master database in Baltimore. And so I am working with housing authorities as well as my team to collect information from you, which is a copy of that letter from the local SSA office, so we can send it to SSA Baltimore and say, SSA Baltimore, can you make sure that the records are updated? Because sometimes the record is updated locally, but it didn't get flagged on all the appropriate screens within the SSA database to fix it. So we want to make sure that that information gets fixed. Now, one thing you should know is that HUD obtains the death information from SSA on a monthly basis, and that information is posted in EIV between the 1st and the 15th of the month. And then your Deceased Tenants Report is updated every weekend when EIV does its weekend summarization job. And as long as that weekend summarization job is successful, then the Deceased Tenants Report will be updated to remove those individuals for which you have transmitted an updated 50058 or HUD has obtained updated SSA information. Okay, so that is how your tenants are basically either deleted or added to the Deceased Tenants Report, which is contingent upon the data analysis between the HUD Form 50058 and the SSA data information. So moving right along, what are you required to do with your Deceased Tenants Report? Well, first and foremost, you have to comply with the requirements outlined in the PIH Notice 2010-50, which is a part of the handouts that are a part of this training session today. But in a nutshell, you're required to monitor your Deceased Tenants Report on a monthly basis, contact the next of kin or the emergency contact person to confirm the death, and if applicable, terminate assistance and or tenancy in accordance with the HUD requirements. Now, one of the things that I am working on getting out to you is that one of my team members identified an additional resource that you housing authorities may want to consider using, and we use it here at HUD. When SSA doesn't initially give us the date of death, there's a website that you can go on and put the tenant's social security number in, and it will give you the date of death, and it'll also tell you the date of death was confirmed by either an actual viewing of the death certificate or reported by the family. And so once we have that information consolidated into our PIH-RHIIP.TA distribution message, we'll distribute that information to you so that it's available. So we just want to let you know that that resource is available to you. So it's pretty straightforward to correct the deceased tenant's information, and simply the correction, as I mentioned earlier, is by updating the 5.8 to remove the deceased household members. For single member households, including households that contain living age, you would submit an EOP transaction into PIC. So that's outlined for you on slide number 98. And notice that your first priority is your deceased single member households. Now, do keep in mind, for your multiple member households that contain deceased individuals, notice on the next slide here, you're going to update the family composition to remove the deceased household members. For your single member households, you're submitting an EOP transaction. It's that simple. These are easy fixes. Newsflash, and this is particularly on the Housing Choice Voucher Program. For you folks that are new and you might not have all the training yet, understand this: the Housing Choice Voucher is not transferable. Individuals who were not a part of the household at the time of the family member's death, or perhaps you had a situation where the head of household was in the process of adding somebody, that's okay to add them. But if Sean shows up and says, hey, you know, my Aunt Bessie died, and, you know, I got the last will and testament right here that says she bequeathed voucher number 25678. Now you just have to think to yourself, TBSSSS, but you won't say that. Mr. Sean, I'm so sorry to hear of the passing of Aunt Bessie. However, these vouchers are not transferable, and I want to give you a news flash because my team here, and 3 out of the 6 are here today, they can tell you, I'm not going to point them out because y'all might want to try and get them or something, but we're only here to help you all. Okay, we're only here to help you, but I want you to know, do not fudge your 5.8 records, and do not fudge your tenant file records to transfer that voucher to somebody who was not a part of the household. Because we're going to find out, and if we actually come on site or we require you to provide us with documentation and it suggests that you transferred that voucher illegally, guess who's going to pay that HAP? You are, not HUD. We're going to ask for our money back. You cannot transfer the voucher to a family member who was not a part of the family composition or in the process of being added. Because we've had some scenarios where poor Miss Bessie, she was going through chemotherapy, but at the time of that interim annual re-exam, she had written down on her re-exam packet she wanted to add her nephew Sean to the family composition, and unfortunately she died before y'all could even finish doing the criminal background check and all the screening. So in those instances, we will say that as long as there was a formal request to add that person and you were in the process of adding that family member to the family composition, then and only then can you give that voucher to somebody else. So we all clear on that, right? Vouchers are not transferable, cannot be deeded, cannot be willed, no IOUs. I owe you my voucher when I kick the bucket. No, does not happen, okay? So keep that in mind. Notice again, generating the deceased tenants report, very simplistic. Notice the same roles again can access the deceased tenants report, including your applicant. Your applications processor can access the deceased tenants report, and then anybody who's viewing EIV income information in the system can access this report. And I can't make it any simpler. I want to see the deceased tenants report. Which link do I click on? Duh, HUD spelled backwards. Deceased tenants. See how simple that is? You don't even have to read the user's manual for that one. Click on the deceased tenants report. You're going to select your various report criteria. You're going to then click on the Get Reports. And notice that for your deceased tenants, we've got that new feature here where you can look by action type. But again, I say work smarter, not harder. Just go with the system defaults. If you're just public housing, just say I want to see public housing tenants, all deceased public housing tenants. However, you do have the ability to specify I only want to see single member households, or I want to see multiple member households, or I want to see all. And you just simply click on the Get Report. And here is a housing authority. Now this is real data, but I have masked the information. So all you know is that this is California. They have 4 dead tenants. Notice though, the good news is that with this particular deceased tenants report, none of them are single member households. And remember, you know that they're single member households because they have the red star next to them. These are multiple member households. And notice that some of these folks died in 2010, and the data came into EIV in February. It's now May. So Housing Authority, you need to make sure that you're updating the family composition, Section 3 of the 5.8, and transmitting it to the PIC system immediately so that these names can fall off your deceased tenants report. You know that if your report does not have zeros going across, there's some work for you to do. Okay? See how simple that is? That's easy. Okay, moving right along, the identity verification report. Now I want to show you a report that's going to help you to identify tenants who have failed the EIV pre-screening process, failed the SSA identity test process, or is pending verification. And this report is going to assist you to identify individuals who may not have presented a valid Social Security number, or it may identify some administrative boo-boos or errors that you have made on your 5.8, okay? Then also, remember I said earlier, all individuals that are required to disclose a Social Security number, by now they should have done so. So for any household who does not have Social Security numbers disclosed, guess what that means? They're not eligible for assistance. Okay, and my team has downloaded the failed verification report as of March 31st, 2011, and we're going to be reaching out to those housing authorities to find out from you what is the status of these Social Security numbers, or is it that you've updated your 5.8, but for some reason that 5.8 was not successfully transmitted into PIC, and we're going to help you to resolve those issues. But the bottom line is we need to ensure that families who are eligible to receive assistance receive that assistance. Now, I just want to make this perfectly clear today so that there's no misunderstanding. Social Security numbers have always been required since the inception of 24 CFR Part 5, Section 216. I also want to emphasize that on the books, since the inception of the required disclosure of Social Security numbers, that the penalty for failure to disclose a Social Security number has always been termination or denial of assistance. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you, in Baltimore, we never, it was not industry practice to deny assistance. You know what we did. We took that little 5/8 and we put 9999999 and kept it moving. Yeah, just give it to me when you get it. But I'm here to tell you, it's a new day. No social, no assistance. No assistance, no payment. So if you have folks who have not disclosed, and like I said, they should have been disclosed, those socials, by now. It's been over a year since the rule was reiterated about Social Security number disclosure, okay? So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But also your identity verification report is going to also identify your deceased tenants. Okay, and then notice here that your deceased tenants report is also going to assist with the availability of EIV income information, because remember, in order for HUD to get income information about your tenants, we must have a valid Social Security number. We do not get income information for any individual who has an invalid Social Security number or an H number, okay? So remember, the H number is that alternate ID. We need a valid Social Security number to obtain income information. So with that said, PHAs are required to comply with the requirements outlined in PIH Notice 2010-3, which again was extended, as mentioned earlier. That notice was extended for another year, and you're required to monitor your report on a monthly basis. And if applicable, you need to require the family to provide you with updated information, official documentation, and or current documentation from SSA. Okay, one of the things why I have mentioned that the identity verification report identifies invalid Social Security numbers, this report also identifies surnames that are not matching with SSA records because, for example, my name is Nicole Faison, however, what's on file at Social Security Administration is Nicole Lawyer. So if I came to you today and I gave you my birth certificate, driver's license, and all these other documentation that says Nicole Faison, you're looking at me like, okay, well, Nicole Faison is your name. That's not the name that I'm using with SSA. What's on SSA files must match your 5/8. So what you have to say to me is, Nicole, I understand that you use the name Nicole Faison out in the street. What's that other name that you're using? Because that's the name that has to be on my 5/8. And I may squabble with you and give you a hard way to go, but the bottom line is I better give you that other name, because if I don't, guess what's going to happen to me? See ya. Okay, so it's very simple. And if you'll look at pages 12 through 16 of that PIH notice, that will give you the guidance that you need to correct the various deficiencies with the surname or the date of birth that are outlined in that report. And then we also tell you, make sure you update the HUD form 50058 with the SSA provided or tenant provided information. And unfortunately, now I want to use this as an example because this happened during the month of April. And I want you to understand that PIH Notice 2010-3 tells you exactly what the corrective action that you need to implement to address the deficiencies identified in your identity verification report. If you do not read that notice, or if you do not follow the corrective action that's given to you, you will make a mistake and you could be subject to a lawsuit. And case in point, we had a young lady that went in for her annual re-exam, and they didn't pull the identity verification report, but the income report, remember, you don't ever have to look at any of these reports because any issues with the personal identifiers will be reflected on the EIV income report. And on the EIV income report for this particular tenant, it said verification failed. Date of birth is blah, 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 blah. And it said what the date of birth was. So we tell you in PIH Notice 2010-3 that whatever date of birth is on SSA records and as conveyed at the end of the error message in the EIV, you are to update Section 3 of the 5.8 with the SSA provided information. Well, I think that Housing Authority did not read that notice, and the reason I came to that conclusion is because they actually terminated the woman's voucher because they said that she did not provide the requested information. However, keep in mind when they noted the disparity in the birth date, they told her, you have to resolve this with SSA. Well, she went to SSA and she said, look, you say that I was born in 1948. I say I was born in 1954. Well, SSA said, well, this is what we have from vital records. So in order for your birth date to be changed on SSA records, you must produce to them a birth certificate so that they can update your date of birth. And if you don't produce that date of birth, whatever date of birth they have down for you, that's what stays in the record. But the lady did not agree with SSA. So the housing authorities, they just left well enough alone, took the documentation that she gave, that she went to SSA, but they still did not update the 5.8 with the SSA provided information. So it came around again. Oh, and the lady had a grievance. She had a grievance hearing, and the grievance officer said, you know what, reinstate her voucher. She did what she was supposed to do. Well, lo and behold, here she comes for the annual reexam again. Well, guess what? That same error exists because the PHA did not update the 5.8. Guess what happened? Terminated her voucher again. She went through a grievance process. This time the grievance officer said, look, this is an issue with PIC and you gotta rectify this. No, it's not any PIC issues you, the PHA, must rectify, not the tenant. Nonetheless, she lost the grievance hearing. Guess what she did? She sued. She got Judge Judy. Well, not Judge Judy. She got some judge in the state. And guess what happened? She won. And guess what the judge ordered? Reinstate her voucher retroactively to November 2010. Guess who's got to pay? Housing Authority. Remember what I said earlier? If you follow the HUD guidance, you don't have to worry about any types of boo-boos. Had they done what the notice told them to do, which was to update the 5.8 with the SSA provided SSA information, they wouldn't have had that issue. So I just want to make sure everybody is clear. Please read pages 12 through 16 of that notice. Because outside of that, if the family has not provided the information that's necessary, for example, SSNs, or they fail to give you documentation that you require to update the 5.8, then that's grounds for termination in accordance with 24 CFR Part 5, Section 218. Memorize it. 24 CFR Part 5, Section 218. Write that down. We're going to make bumper stickers out of that too. Okay? See how simple that is? Notice that accessing the report, again, very simple for the identity verification report. However, notice the caveat here, your application processor cannot access this report. This report is only for your occupancy specialist for the voucher and the public housing program. Very simplistic. You simply click on the identity verification report, select your report criteria, click on the Get Report button. See how easy that is? Couple clicks, click, click, and here's your report. This report contains full 9-digit social security number so that you can follow up with it. Notice that your identity verification report defaults to the failed EIV pre-screening page. And please note that these issues on this page typically are PHA issues. That means typically the most common error messages on here, notice failed effective date check, failed SSN check. Also, I want to point out to you on the screen, because a lot of folks miss this, Notice that there's 3 links there to the right, and one of them says Error Description Help. If you click on that link, a new window will open up and list all of the possible error messages for this report and provide a short scenario of what the error message means. But I don't have a screenshot of that, but I've showed it to you before in previous EIV training sessions. But I want you to know, for your failed effective date check, that is a warning flag that you have an overdue annual re-exam, or you have not transmitted successfully an updated 5.8 with a date within the last 15 months. This is an easy fix. All you have to do is basically submit an updated 50058. Now let me give you a heads up, people. I know we get behind on annual re-exams. It happens to the best of us. And I remember those days behind on the annual re-exams because some of your tenants won't come in and they just kind of fall through the cracks. They can't fall through the cracks, okay? So you want to make sure that you're actually doing a re-exam for that family. Do not just submit a 5.8 where you just change the effective date of the action, okay? Yeah, they do it. We had a housing authority that actually, they were 60% of their re-exams were behind. And I had to actually monitor their progress in getting their re-exams up to date. And so all of a sudden, you know, for a housing authority that's required to submit, say, 500 re-exams a month, there was 4,000. And I'm like, I said, that's humanly impossible to crank out 4,000 re-exams in a month's time period. So I started opening the 5.8s and looking at them detail for detail and looking at the 5.8s in the historical PIC database. Guess what, my friends? Same income from 1975. Just change the effective date. If you do that, we're going to sit and calculate what their rent should have been, and we're going to send you a bill. Or we're going to tell you we'll take that out of your next month's check. Don't do that. Don't fudge the re-exams. And this is another thing. If you haven't done a re-exam for somebody in 5 years, you can't go back and redo those re-exams. You got to put a period and move forward. Okay, I had a housing authority. They sitting there trying to do a re-exam from 2000. I'm like, what are you doing? That's like, you can't go back and calculate what they should have been paying in 2000. You have to put a period. It's 2011, whatever the current re-exam date is, you start it there and you move forward. You cannot go back. You cannot undo what you didn't do in the past, okay? So don't even waste your time doing that, okay? All right, so your failed SSN check, these you really don't have to worry about unless these are individuals who are eligible citizens or eligible non-citizens. This failed SSN check will occur anytime somebody has an H number or a PIC-generated alternate ID, okay? So in this case, if it's applicable, make sure you are updating the 5.8 of these individuals with an SSN. Now, if they do not contend to have eligible immigration status, then they're always going to be on that report and there's nothing for you to do. However, please keep in mind, the goal is to collect Social Security numbers for those individuals because no Social Security number, no income data. Now, here is your failed SSA identity test results. Here is where the tenant has passed the HUD EIV pre-screening. SSA has come back and said, look, the data on the 5.8 does not match what's on SSA database, okay? And notice that I've kind of redacted the error messages towards the end of the error messages. And if you look at Sierra, they tell you the verification found, SSN not found in SSA records. At the end of that error message is the correct Social Security number. So you need to take that number and update your 5.8. Okay, everybody understand that one? Also, notice for Ryan, down towards the bottom here, verification failed. Surname matched, but the date of birth did not match SSA records, 7/28/2001. What you have on your 5.8 is 7/28/2004. Now, I know you're going to say, well, hey, I got a driver's license state-issued ID that says 7/28/2004. That's what's on my 5.8. PIH Notice 2010-3 says you have to change it to what SSA says it is, and then you need to refer your client to SSA to get that fixed. Okay? So I just want to make sure everybody is clear on that. Okay? Other common issues that failed SSA identity, basically invalid social security number, invalid surname, invalid date of birth. And again, notice that we refer you to pages 13 through 16 of the PIH Notice 2010-3. And I know some folks are like, well, what happened to page 12? Well, 12 is the introductory to that segment on resolving incorrect personal identifiers. 13 through 16 is the actual, it's a little chart that outlines and lists every single error message that could show up on this failed SSA identity test. And then in the far right is the corrective action that you need to implement to address that deficiency. Okay? Now notice here, and this is a new update. This is why this is updated EIV system training to provide you with new information. As I mentioned, we're working to help clean up any data issues. And so if a tenant continues to appear on your identity verification report and you have followed the guidance outlined in 2010-3, I want for you to notify HUD headquarters, which is me and my team here at Real Estate Assessment Center, via PIH.RHIIP.TA@HUD.gov with a copy to your designated EIV coordinator. And what we're asking you to provide us is with your PHA code, as well as a copy of the letter that your tenant received from the local SSA office saying that their personal identifiers is this, okay? Because remember, as I mentioned earlier, if the local SSA has updated the records but it hasn't gone into the mainframe in Baltimore where we match, we need to make sure that that issue is resolved, and that's an issue that HUD can work out with SSA, okay? So that, and actually, if you are a housing authority that had tenants on your identity verification report as of March 31st, 2011, you will receive an email notice, and the email notice goes to the executive director of the housing authority, and it's from PIH.improperpayments@HUD.gov. It will basically attach a copy of your report as of March 31st. It will provide you with guidance on how to fix the issues, and it also will show you an example of the various SSA letters that tenants receive. And we'll show you how to fix those, and we'll ask you to provide us with those SSA letters that your client has to show that they have been to the SSA office to resolve that, and we'll work with SSA Baltimore. Now here's an error message, or actually it's really not an error message, but most of you consider an error message where you have tenants listed under pending verification. Now in this particular scenario, it says no results, no records found. Basically, pending verification means HUD is getting ready to send those personal identifiers to SSA. So if you notice on the next slide, here's a sample pending verification. And basically, here, there's nothing for you to do. HUD has to send these records to SSA for matching. So I want to make it emphatically clear to you, no action is required by the housing authority with respect to anyone showing up on the pending verification report. However, there have been a few instances, and I say very few out of this 6 or 7 million records that we send to SSA on a monthly basis. There have been a few occurrences where you have someone who's on the pending verification report and they've been there for a year. So in those instances where you had somebody where they've been in the program for over a year and we've never matched them, then you can send a message to PIH.RHIIP.TA@HUD.gov that, hey, Nicole, Sally has been showing up on the pending verification report since 2009. Can you look into this? And then I will actually follow up with my IT team and SSA to figure out why we never got that particular Social Security number matched, and then I'll let you know. But the bottom line is, for anyone pending verification, those tenant personal identifiers will be sent to SSA with the next regularly scheduled SSA matching process. So that's pretty much straightforward. Now moving on to the immigration report, which is a fairly new report, and we created this report back in, I believe it was late 2009, and this report is designed to assist housing authorities with monitoring of PHA and tenant compliance with the SSN disclosure and reporting requirements, as well as making sure that you have effectively implemented proration of assistance for mixed families. Secondly, we want to assist you with following up with tenants that are pending verification of citizenship or immigration status, as you have reported on the HUD form 50058. And then we also want to make sure that your eligible citizens or non-citizens with an assigned alternate ID disclose a valid Social Security number. So with that said, housing authorities are required to comply with the requirements outlined in the HUD-EIV tip sheet, which was distributed in March 2010. And that tip sheet is posted on the HUD web pages under the EIV Training and Technical Assistance web page. And I am going to be updating this tip sheet because there have been a couple changes at Homeland Security with respect to immigration, and so I will be updating that accordingly within the next couple months here. But also, you're required to monitor this report, again, on a monthly basis and update your 5.8 accordingly to provide tenant or SSA or Homeland Security provided information. And then, if applicable, you're required to have your families to provide updated information and or current documentation from SSA or DHS. So, for example, if you had somebody who was pending verification of their immigration status, and let's say hypothetically you did the check through SAVE, but you didn't get a result back. So you then went to Homeland Security and you made a manual request for verification of the eligible immigration status. So in that instance, if you have them classified as pending verification, you're supposed to follow up to make sure and check with Homeland Security. Sometimes they may not respond as quickly as you want to, and then we forget about it. And so meanwhile, you have a household member who's pending verification of eligible immigration status for the last 2 years. So you want to make sure that you're following up and obtaining the necessary documentation. You need to make a determination. Either they're an eligible citizen or they're an eligible non-citizen, okay? And also you want to make sure, and you're required to ensure that if applicable, for mixed families, and mixed families are, remember, those families where you have at least one individual who has either eligible immigration status or U.S. citizenship to be eligible to receive assistance. And those are mixed families because there's more than one family member who has eligible status. However, for those members that do not have eligible U.S. citizenship or eligible immigration status, you have to prorate the assistance. And let me just remind you, individuals, non-citizens, can be in this country legally, but be ineligible non-citizens. And remember, in order for an individual to receive assistance, they must be a U.S. citizen or they must have permanent lawful residency in the United States. That means if you have lawful permanent residency in the United States, you have an I-551, also known commonly as a green card. Okay? No green card, you're not eligible. Please understand this because I get this question all the time. Well, they waiting on Homeland Security. When you get your green card, then we don't have to prorate assistance. Okay? So just want to make it clear. You must be a U.S. citizen or have eligible immigration status or lawful permanent residency in the United States to qualify. And of course, last but not least, if applicable, An individual who does not disclose information necessary to update the SSA or update, verification of immigration status. If the family has failed to do their part, then you would have to terminate assistance or tenancy in accordance with the HUD requirements. Generating the report, again, very simplistic. Anybody who's a voucher or public housing PHA occupancy user can access the report. And all you do is click on the immigration report link, select your report selection criteria, and notice here you have, again, action type, reexamination month, program type, and just click on the Get Report. And here are the results. And notice here, this is a prime example. You've got, look at the first one. Philip has an H number. He was born July 30th, 2010. He's classified as an eligible citizen. What's the issue here? No social. I need a social for every eligible citizen. An eligible citizen has a social security number. If they don't have a social security number and they're an eligible citizen, guess what you're going to do? Refer them to SSA. They're going to fill out an SS-5 form, if I'm not mistaken, application for a social security card or replacement social security card. Look at what was that, Frederica? Yes. Ineligible non-citizen. She's got an H number. Do we need to do anything with this one? What do we need to do with Frederica? Nothing. She's classified as an ineligible non-citizen. So the only thing you can do is you can just confirm that she does not have an SSA-issued social security number, and we make a recommendation that for individuals who do not disclose a social security number that you obtain a written declaration that they have not been issued an SSA number and keep that in the file, okay? It's a recommendation, not a requirement. We recommend it. That's a good cover yourself tactic. Okay, let's look at Zakira. Eligible non-citizen. What do we need to do with this one? Exactly. We need to get a social from her. She is an eligible non-citizen. Eligible non-citizens have a social. However, she's still got a PIC-generated alternate ID. So we need a social for Zakira, who was born in 1993. So that social security number is long overdue. So Housing Authority, we're not going to call you out, but if this is your Housing Authority and you have anybody with an eligible non-citizen and an H number this week, tomorrow, get cracking, get working on it, replace these alternate IDs with social security numbers, because it will come back to haunt you. Okay, now let's get into use of the EIV income report. Purpose of accessing the income report is very simple. One of my favorites is that we get to streamline the income verification process. As we've talked many years now, is that EIV will allow for you to streamline the income verification process. It's also going to identify new income sources, including those income sources that may or may not have been reported to you, or income that might have been partially reported. So we have, unreported and underreported income. And then my favorite, what I love about EIV is that you have the ability to see the historical patterns of earnings for your clients. Now, some of you all have clients that abuse the system, and you all know who those are. Those are the individuals who quit their job just before the annual re-exam so that you can set a rent at the minimum rent. Can I just make a recommendation? And I mean, it's a recommendation only. Where can you live in the United States for zero? Public housing, Section 8, because the statute says minimum rent cannot be greater than $50. If you all have a 0 minimum rent, you all need to revisit that. Okay? Step it up. It's you in the 21st century now, okay? And some of my colleagues, y'all remember in Baltimore, we had a zero rent, and I was reminiscing with my former supervisor during the break, and she said, Nicole was so hard on everybody, even the seniors. She didn't cut nobody no slack. I sure didn't. Look, Granny, you got some money. You in here frying chicken, and you going door to door giving folks food, but you want to come and tell me you don't have any income. There's no such thing as 0 rent. So if y'all have a 0 rent policy, minimum rent, 0 minimum rent, revisit it. Step it up, 50 bucks, 25, something. Only in public housing choice voucher program, but I can't make you do it because the statute says 0 to 50, okay? But I'm just saying, you know, that's y'all know what I'm saying. I'm getting all choked up on that 0 rent. So anyway, I love observing historical patterns of earnings, of income, because you can no longer pull the wool over Nicole Faison's eyes. You cannot come in here and tell me today that you have 0 income when you have a historical pattern of earning. You haven't gone to unemployment and filed for unemployment. Just ask questions, because as Judge Judy said, if it doesn't make sense, it's not true. Let's think about it. You've been working all along up until this annual re-exam, and then you want to come to me today and tell me you have no income. Your main source of income from employment is now gone. Well, have you gone to unemployment and filed for benefits? No, I don't want no handout from the government. What? Does that make sense? That does not make sense. If your sole source of income, and President Obama, I love you, but when y'all were prepared in Congress, when y'all were prepared to shut down the government on April 8th, did I not tell y'all, go on, download your standard Form 50, because I'm going to be in the unemployment line first thing Monday morning, filing for unemployment benefits, getting my little $250, whatever they're going to give me a week. Logically, you go and you file for unemployment. I mean, unless you're married to Bill Gates and you have, you know, billions of dollars, or anybody related to Bernie Madoff? Maybe you got billions stashed somewhere. Now you have the ability to see the historical patterns of earnings of your clients so that you can kind of have a feel for the true picture, okay? The other thing I love about the income report, as I mentioned in the previous segment, is that it does identify for you whether or not the personal identifiers, PII, personally identifiable information such as the name, date of birth, surname, match SSA records. And ultimately, this is going to reduce administrative and subsidy payment errors. Okay, so what you're required to do is comply with the requirements outlined in PIH Notice 2010-19. Bottom line, you are required to review the EIV income report for every family that comes before you during an annual or an interim reexamination of income and family composition, because we want to make sure that what is being told to you during that process is complete and accurate. Now remember, EIV is not a be-all to end-all. The system displays income information as provided to HUD from the third-party sources. So if the employer has not provided the information to the master database for wages, it's not going to be in there. So it's not uncommon for you to say, well, wait a minute, I know that Becky works at the Piggly Wiggly. Why isn't it in the EIV? It's not in EIV because the Piggly Wiggly's payroll office hasn't submitted it to the state workforce agency, or if they have submitted it to the state workforce agency hasn't submitted to the National Director of New Hires. Okay? Remember, look at 2010-19, the What You Should Know About EIV document that's an attachment to that PIH notice. Clearly outlines for you how the data gets into EIV, what is the source of that information. If the source does not provide HUD with that data, we cannot make it available to you. So as you're reviewing the income report, you want to make sure that you're getting documentation from the tenant. If it says they work at Piggly Wiggly, I need current pay stubs, and you're going to use those pay stubs to do the income calculation. If necessary, you're going to obtain your traditional third-party verification from the income source if necessary. And again, look at 2010-19. We tell you the scenarios in which you must pursue the traditional third-party verification. Pay stubs are third-party verification as outlined in that PIH notice. The only reason you have to go out for traditional third-party verifications is in very few scenarios, okay? And the whole point in looking at the EIV income report is to identify any income disparities and resolving those issues with your client. As I mentioned earlier, electronic retention of the income reports is permissible. Your public PHA occupancy voucher and public housing users can access the income report by head of household for a single income report or by reexamination month for multiple income reports. Notice here, click on the by head of household link, enter the data, and if notice here, you're entering, again, work smarter, not harder. You're entering in the social security number of your tenant. If you do not have the social, then you can search by last name for within your particular PHA. But again, you want to work smarter, not harder. Just put in the 9-digit social security number, because if you enter the last name of Davis, and Davis is a very common name. If you're DC Housing Authority or New York City Housing Authority, San Francisco Housing Authority, and you put in Davis, you might come up with 5,000 hits. So that's why, yep, she said, okay. She's like, work smarter, not harder. Keep it simple, KISS, and put in the 9-digit social, click on the search button. Notice here, your income report for the household will be displayed. If you do a search by last name or date of birth, you'll have to do multiple clicks, because what will happen is you'll get a listing of all the results that are displayed, and then you will select the family that you need here. In this particular instance, I searched for the date of birth, 1971, excuse me, and there was only one result, so that's the record I needed, and it was for Kimberly. To access Kimberly's income report, all you have to do is double click on her name, and the income report will show up. See how simple that is? To generate batch income reports, click on by reexamination month. Again, you will select your report criteria, click on the search button. Here, you will get a listing of the various summary reports available to you. Notice that for this particular housing authority, they have 12 households with income information, and you will simply click on the income report to see the summary and the details report. Now, one thing I want to mention, when you click on this income report, the income summary report page is displayed, okay? The system automatically defaults to the last name that begin with the letter A. So I want to remind you, this was a new feature that we put into the system last year, because folks wanted to say, well, I just want to pull the income reports for the last name of H. So you would just click on H. But if you want to see all of the income reports, you must click on the all, okay? So don't panic when this page loads up and you only get 3 records. It's displaying the records for those individuals whose last name begins with a letter A as in apple, okay? So if you want to get to all, or you want to get to, you just click on the applicable link along there and you're good to go. So now, this leads us to the income discrepancy resolution using the income report. And, you know, the income discrepancy report really has been problematic for housing authorities. And I personally and professionally believe that you all are wasting your times with the income discrepancy report, because you, instead of focusing on what is the issue at heart, which is identifying the income that may not have been reported. You all are trying to back into the numbers on that report. So guess what? As of today, you can no longer try and back into those numbers because I've taken that report away. Can you get excited about that? So, effective as of this morning, I took away the income discrepancy report. The only people that can see the income discrepancy report, and Ed, you know who my team is, Ed, but don't shine the camera on them. But only the people on my team can see the income discrepancy report, okay? HUD offices, you too can no longer see the income discrepancy report because y'all are wasting your time, and I want to make sure that your efforts and your energy are directed into areas of effective use and administration of the HUD-EIV system. So with that said, PHAs are required to comply with the income discrepancy resolution process outlined at 24 CFR Part 5, Section 236, and the PIH Notice 2010-19. And basically, you're going to review the EIV income report, identify any income that is unfamiliar to you, and basically remember, when you're doing the annual re-exam, you're looking at what was reported on the last 5/8. And if you see on the last 5/8 that the only income was child support, and then you look in EIV and you see 2 years worth of employment information and Social Security benefits for the last 10 years, are you or are you not going to have a conversation with your tenant? Now, hopefully, do y'all remember my character from the September training, Peggy, the disgruntled employee that doesn't like to talk with clients? Peggy is not in this audience today, but if Peggy is back at your office or if Peggy is watching the session, you will have to talk to your clients no matter how badly you don't like to communicate. But Peggy, you may want to consider another line of work, because if you look at your position description, one of the requirements is effective communication with clients. And I assure you, this income discrepancy resolution process requires dialogue. You will talk with your tenants. Now, some of you may get creative, as I did in Baltimore, and you could do like the little children in school, and it's like you play the yes or no question game. Okay, this is going to be very easy, Becky. True or false? Do you work at the Piggly Wiggly? True. When did you start? May 15th, 1975. Do you have current pay stubs? Yes. Please provide. See how simple that is? Just ask questions, get information, resolve the disparity. Now, some of you all are going to have clients where it's not going to be that straightforward and easy, but if you've watched my training sessions along the way, for those clients that make it just unbearably difficult for you, maybe this program is not for them. So those you may just have to say, see ya. Because you do have to answer questions, you do have to provide documentation, and if you don't want to do that, this program is not for you. So, of course, in the instance where you have identified unreported income, the family is required to repay that money, okay? And if you'll notice on the next slide, we tell you, you are required to demand, see the operative word, you are required to demand repayment of the retroactive rent. I don't care if it's public housing or housing choice voucher. The bottom line is the tenant rent contribution was incorrect based on unreported income. So if you have overpaid HAP on behalf of a family who has not reported complete and accurate income, guess what? That money has to come back to you from the tenant. And that has to go back into your net restricted assets account, okay? So they have to repay, and we encourage you to take any other appropriate action as directed by HUD and or PHA administrative policies. So I want to show you the case study. So if you'll flip to the case study, this is an example of a family who came in for an annual re-exam. And your case study is at the very back. It's like the second to the last transaction. notice here that Mary Contrary is due for a re-exam that is effective September 1, 2011. The most recent type of action in PIC was effective September 1, 2010. The Housing Authority does not require families to report increases in income in between the annual re-exam. Notice here on the first page, here's the family composition and the reported income as of 9/1/2010. She reported a non-wage income of $444 annually. Now, as you can see, for some unknown reason, the Housing Authority excluded this income. I'm not sure why this non-wage income was excluded, but that's wrong. That's an error right there. But if you flip through and look at the page 2 and page 3, you have the 5/8 information showing the expected income per year. Notice because the income is excluded, basically, you know, her most recent TTP is $50, hip hip hooray, that's the minimum rent. And her landlord, Hubba Bubba, y'all know I love Bubba. What would an EIV training be without Bubba? So, notice that the tenant's rent to the owner, Mary has to pay $29, and then you pay $471. So here we are, Mary is in for her re-exam for September. If you flip to page 4, are you with me? Will you be having a conversation with Mary? Now, I'm going to be honest with you. These are no-brainers. Social Security, the likelihood of a person not receiving Social Security, and SSA says that they are getting it, is like slim to none. 99.9999%. As Maury Povich would say, you are not. No, I'm not. Sorry, wrong story. You are not the baby's daddy. You are receiving Social Security. So here, the young lady has been getting Social Security benefits since January 1st, 2006. Now, I want to point something out to you because Mary was kind enough, and I'm sorry, this is not Mary Contrary, but Mary, I actually received an email message from Mary on Friday who provides technical assistance and consultation services to housing authorities. And Mary said, you know, basically, could you clarify how it is that the case study shows that Mary actually is disabled and is receiving the $400 disability allowance? Because if you notice here, Mary Contrary was born in 1950. So basically, Mary is what, 50, 51? Or 61? She's 61. So by definition, she is not elderly. So the question is, how do you give her the $400 disability allowance? Now, if you remember previous EIV training sessions, I explained that an individual who's under the age of 62 and receiving a disability payment from Social Security, you know that they're disabled. So if you notice here, supplemental security income for Mary, this is not money paid to Mary on behalf of her child, because if it was for the child, it would actually be under the child's Social Security number, and it would list the child's name and Mary as the payee. Okay? So if you look here, not only was Mary getting SSI, and keep in mind, SSI benefits is a disability payment for individuals who need medical assistance. However, they have not either paid enough money into the Social Security system or they have not earned enough credits to draw Social Security under their Social Security account. So effective 1/1/2006, Mary became eligible for SSI payments, and SSA determined that her disability onset date was 3/25/1993. So SSA determined that she was disabled as of 1993, but they didn't start paying her until 2006. So I assure you that Mary did receive a lump sum payment for the period of March 25th, 1993 through December 31st, 2005, but that's not reflected here. But I just want to alert you, the fact that she's receiving a disability payment for herself, whether it's SSI or Social Security benefits, lets you know that she is disabled. So that is proof that she's disabled, and the existence of the EIV income report in the file is the justification for the $400 disability allowance. But also notice that she was receiving at some point dual entitlement, but remember, dual entitlement is benefits paid under another person's Social Security number, and you're eligible for that if the child's parent is deceased and the child is either under the age of 18 or over the age of 18 and a full-time student, okay? But then also notice that her SSI payments did stop in September of 2010. Then she began drawing Social Security benefits. This is a disability. Remember, anytime you're drawing Social Security benefits and you're under 62, that means you are disabled if it is under your record. And in this particular case study, Mary began drawing Social Security benefits October 2007. And notice that it started at 273, and then she became fully eligible under her record, and that's why they stopped the SSI payment. So if you flip to the solution, which is on page 6, we basically show you the period of rent underpayment based on this housing authority's policy. And the bottom line is that Mary Contrary owes the housing authority $8,316 for the period of September 1st, 2007 through 8/31/2011. So, of course, we asked Mary Contrary, how would you like to pay for that, cash, check, or charge? Somehow authorities take credit cards. Gotta get, what's that song? Get that paper. Gotta get that money. Okay? So this is just an example of how you would calculate a retroactive rent, okay? So now I want to move into, last but not least, I saved the best for last, as Denise Williams would sing. Save the best for last. I think it was Denise Williams. Probably not, because y'all like, nah, I don't remember that song, Nicole. But anyway, I think it was her. Not Denise Williams, Vanessa Williams, a pretty girl with the long hair and the blue eyes. Save the best for last. It was a love song. That's what it was. Okay, so debts owed to PHAs and termination module. Now, I'm not going into the nitty-gritty details on this, but for those of you, please, folks, the debts owed module is a very simplistic module to use. If you need technical assistance on how to use the module, refer back to the September 23rd, 2010 EIV training materials, unless you want to go through the user's manual. But I assure you, if you go through the PowerPoint presentation, it's very simplistic, okay? So what you're required to do with the debts owed module, this is new. Please pay attention to slide 150. These are new requirements as of May 2nd because we have enhanced the debts owed module. You are required to follow the HUD requirements outlined in the EIV training materials. That means these materials today, okay? And any other HUD guidance that may come out with respect to PIH-RHIIP messages, any guidance that comes out with respect to this, you need to follow that. And please be reminded, that the HUD Form 52675, which is the debts owed to PHAs and termination notice, you have to give that to all applicants and all participants who are adults. And it's a one-time only deal. The adult signs it the one time, it stays in the file for the duration. Okay? At the next interim or annual, if you have individuals or household members that are going to turn 18, those folks need to sign the HUD Form 52675 and again, maintain it in the family file. And then next, you have to, it's not optional, because HUD has obtained an OMB control number or Paperwork Reduction Act authorization, you are required to enter all applicable adverse information for families that end participation in any PIH program, whether they left the program voluntarily or involuntarily. You're required to maintain the signed form or mailed form 52675, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. I sent out guidance when we first deployed the debts owed module, reminding you that if you have families who have left the program prior to the creation of the debts owed module and you're going to enter debts owed information or any adverse information for those families, you are required to mail to the last known address of that family the HUD Form 52675, and on the signature line indicate mail to last known address on, and put on the date line the date that the form was mailed, and maintain a copy of that in the file. Okay, and that's, again, that's to cover you and to cover HUD. Because remember, your tenants who left the program back in July 2008, they had no idea that this module was coming. But we have to make a good faith effort, which is to mail that notice to the last known address. So if the last known address is the address of that subsidized unit that they were occupying at that point in time, that's all you have to do. Send it to that address. If the mail comes back, guess what? Stamp it the date that you received it, put it in the file folder. That way we can say we attempted to notify you that we were entering adverse information into EIV about you. Okay? Now, in the instance, as we showed you earlier, if EIV shows an adverse record for a family, you are required to provide the family with a copy of their debt owed to PHA and EOP report if they request it. Okay? So let's say hypothetically, the other housing authority where the person applied for assistance did not give the person their EOP record. And they call you up and say, hey, give me a copy of my record. If they ask for it, you have to give it to them. And that is a requirement under the Federal Privacy Act, which is located at Title V, United States Code 552A as amended. Okay? And that Federal Privacy Act specifically says an individual who for whom information is being maintained in a computerized form or in a system of records, which EIV is, they are entitled to receive a copy of any information maintained about them. Also, you're required to honor any tenant disputes of reported adverse information for a period not to exceed 3 years from the EOP date. So what that means is if today you have somebody who left the program on April 30th, 2011, and you put adverse information into the system, they may dispute that information with you for a period up to 3 years from the date of the EOP. After 3 years, basically after April 30th, 2014, they come forward and say, I want to dispute that. Sorry, the dispute period is over. It's similar to the credit reporting agency requirements, except for ours is 3 years. Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, you have 60 days to basically dispute stuff. We give you 3 years. Anybody know the significance of 3 years? 3 years is the HUD's record retention policy. You're required to retain EOP records for a period of 3 years from the EOP date. So that's where the 3 years comes from. And In the event that the tenant submits a written dispute of their EIV information with respect to debts owed or adverse information, you must notify the tenant in writing of your action regarding that dispute within 30 days of the receipt of such written dispute. Now we're going to get into entering, updating information. Again, please mark this slide. Slide number 154. You are required to enter adverse information within 60 days of EOP date. Notice the third bullet. You must eliminate any backlog of pending EOP records by 12/31/2011. Remember that blank adverse record that I showed you where there's nothing on it? By 12/31, you got to do one or two things. Either delete the record because there's nothing adverse to report, or enter the adverse information, okay? Now, before, we know that, a lot of folks had a lot of EOP records. Now that we've enhanced the EIV system to have all these new bells and whistles to try and make entering the information a little more easier for you, it should be less administratively burdensome to enter this information. However, if come December 1st and you see that you're not making headway with eliminating this backlog, then what I would suggest you do is send a letter to me and explaining why you need an extension. Because HUD's going to be monitoring this come January 1, because we're going to want to make sure that everything has been entered. So if you foresee that you're going to have an issue, don't start sending me letters now, please. Okay, because some of y'all out there in webcast land, you know who you are. You got about 14,000 EOP records. Go on and send her a letter now. No. December 1st, send me a letter if you realize that you're not going to be able to make the December 31st deadline, and provide me with an action plan as to how you're going to eliminate your backlog and when you anticipate eliminating your backlog. So everybody's on notice as of now. Your backlog of pending EOP records have to be addressed by 12/31. Also, you're required to update any erroneous information you may have entered into EIV. And please note that deleting or entering adverse information for all EOP records, your backlog is considered any family who had an EOP date or end of participation date between June 2008 and April 2011. Those are the records that we consider your backlog. Okay? Next. Please be reminded, in order for you to enter, update, delete information, you must have the program administrator role. This role is added to your user ID by your local HUD office, as well as the EIV user administrator in the field office. And you have to submit a HUD form 52676 to your local HUD office for approval. Please be reminded that EIV copies your PIC EOP records daily. Only EOP records from June 2008 or later are imported into EIV. You cannot report adverse information for families that left the program prior to June 2008, nor can you add EOP records dated prior to June 2008 into EIV. So I just want to let you know, I've told you that from day one. You cannot enter records for these families. And entering information is very simplistic. You'll click on the By SSN link if you want to do it by SSN. And if you want to do batch, you'll click on the By Batch. Please note that your Enter Information link is displayed for EOP records which have never been accessed or updated. Okay? And your Edit Information link is displayed for EOP records which have been accessed previously and adverse information has been entered. And you can see a prior screenshot of that on page 46. By Batch, which is what you're accustomed to doing, you click on the By Batch link. Notice that your available EOP statuses, basically you're reporting any EOP statuses for the families. Failure to pay retro, failure to pay rent, failure to pay other charges, and a whole list of items. Please note that if you enter a dollar amount that's owed to the housing authority, they owe you money because they failed to pay something. And either they failed to pay rent, failed to pay retro, or failed to pay other charges. So you have to enter a failure to pay reason. Deletion of your debts owed information is very simplistic. PHAs are reminded that they have to delete only EOP records for which there is no adverse information to report. Your delete only EOP records that have no adverse information to report, or there was erroneous information and you simply delete that information. Do not, please notice in red, do not delete records of family who paid their debts in full. Instead, what you will do, the key is to show what they owed as of the end of participation date. If they paid the debt in full, there is an EOP status that says debt paid in full. We have plans to modify the EIV system at a later date to allow for you to put in comments if we can get approval to collect those comments that you want to enter. But do not delete records of families who paid the debt in full. Please be reminded, as I mentioned earlier, your deleted records are permanently deleted. To delete a record, it's very simple. You put a check mark in the delete checkbox next to the applicable EOP record and click on the delete button. You'll be prompted twice, as I mentioned to you earlier, to confirm that you want to delete the record. When you confirm deletion of the selected record, it goes bye-bye for good. Okay, and I did mention you can delete 50 records at one time, or you can click multiple records up to 50. Your debts owed to PHA and termination report is nothing more than a report that outlines the statistics for your PHAs with respect to debt owed and adverse information entered for your agency. It's a list of reported tenants, which is at the bottom of the table, and the details of the debt owed and or termination information for the tenant. And so to access the information for applicable tenants, you just click on the actual household member link to view those details. And here's a screenshot to show you the information for your debts owed to PHAs and termination report. Now, do keep in mind that if you have not entered any adverse information for your tenants, the report will be blank. Okay? So that, my friends, is the conclusion of segment 3. I am here to answer questions for you if you would like to stay. For our live studio audience, we have certificates of completions for you based on your registration form that you submitted. So your certificate will look like this, and you may pick it up on the outside of this room. If you would like an EIV, I love EIV bumper sticker, feel free to come visit me, and I will be more than happy to provide you with one of those. And Ed, I am going to close out this segment. If none of my live studio audience participants want to go on camera with questions, for those of you that are viewing this training session by webcast, all inquiries regarding the content of this training should be directed to PIH.RHIIP.TA@HUD.gov. And I want to thank you for attending another EIV training session. I hope that you have found it enjoyable, informative, and valuable information you can take back to your housing authorities. And I thank you for your time.